Yesterday, I wanted to upgrade my doorbell to the latest Kairos version. Yes, I run Kairos on my doorbell, but we can discuss that in a different video. Right now, what I want to tell you is that what should have been a very simple upgrade process ended up being a debugging session. What happened was that I am running Ubuntu on my Raspberry Pi using Kairos, and a later version simply didn't boot. As you can see, I was getting this error here. Thankfully, now this is fixed and you can use it. But obviously, the big problem is that this bug was introduced more than a year ago and nobody noticed it. So in this video, I want to explain a little bit the debugging process that I went through. I think this is helpful whether you're using Kairos or Linux in general. There will obviously be parts that are Kairos specific, but I think you can use it for other distributions as well. So let's start by having a look at the error. What does the error say? First of all, we can see that we are in the Initramfs section of the process of booting. Initramfs is generic in Linux. Now, the image core is something specific of Kairos that we will talk about in a minute. And basically, the problem it's having is that it cannot mount the cost recovery device. All right. So the first thing you do on Kairos is that you can go troubleshooting. Next to the grub command line for the kernel, you can add these two stanzas, rd.break and rd.shell. And this means that it will take you to a shell where you can do some inspection. Unfortunately, this didn't work for me. I didn't have access to the keyboard, which points that more things were broken that can be related to the kernel. Now, just to clarify something, I want to quickly go through the booting process of Kairos on a Raspberry Pi. The first thing that happens is that the Raspberry Pi firmware looks for a file that it can boot on. And in this case, Kairos will chainload Ubuntu. Ubuntu is configured to chainload grub. We do this because we want to give you the exact same experience on AMD 64 and on devices like the Raspberry Pi. Then afterwards, grub will take the kernel and the init RD and continue with the normal process of booting Initramfs and then the rootfs. So this is almost traditional Linux except for the Ubuntu part. Now we saw from the message that we get as far as Initramfs. Unfortunately, we couldn't troubleshoot and the image itself. The good thing is that the raw images are exactly the way it ends up being copied into the SD card. So we can also inspect the image that I have locally on my machine. For that, I can create a loop device with the image and then inspect it with BLKID, or I don't know how you pronounce that, to be honest. But this will show that the device is there. So it's not a problem of the image itself. What could it be then? There's another very helpful thing with Kairos that these images, I don't really need to run them on hardware. I can also inspect them because they are container images that already include the kernel and the init. That's what we're going to do now. Let's just run this image here, which is the one that I built specifically for the upgrade. Then we can see what's inside our boot directory, where we can already start noticing there's a bit of a problem. I see that the Linux kernel here is pointing to a generic kernel, but we are on a Raspberry Pi, so we should be pointing to a Raspberry Pi kernel. And it's also weird that I have two kernels here, when normally, at least for Kairos, you only want one kernel. I can also ls what's inside init.rd, which we can do here, and points out that indeed init.rd is also pointing to the generic kernel. All right, now that we have determined what the problem is, which part of Kairos is in charge of making sure that only the right kernel is in the system? That's Kairos init. Kairos init will take the architecture, this would be in this case ARM64, the model, in this case Raspberry Pi 4, the distribution, which is Ubuntu, and the release 2204. And from there, in this file called package maps, it will identify which are the different kernels that is going to install for your system. Now, as you can see, the actual problem is that we are identifying two different kinds of kernels. One is the Raspberry Pi, the correct one, and the other one is the generic kernel, which we don't want. So the solution is actually fairly simple. All we need to do is remove that line that was introduced by mistake, and then we have a working system, as you already saw. Now, why is the bug here? Well, the big problem is that we don't have automated testing for real hardware. We simply don't have the infrastructure. Ideally, we would spin up Raspberry Pi systems that would test all these different images, but unfortunately, there's no service we could easily afford to do the testing for Kairos there. So right now, the community has been our test suite, and it points out that nobody was using Ubuntu on the Raspberry Pi. The other thing important to mention is that Kairos project has moved to building images mainly for Hadron. We don't stop support, otherwise I would not be fixing this issue here. But the point is that we want to move to Hadron to make sure that the experience is the same for everyone. The thing is, Hadron doesn't have right now packages to interact with the GPIO yet. So that's why I stayed with Ubuntu for now. I might make another video on how to add those packages into Hadron. And as I mentioned, I am doing this for my doorbell. So expect an update video where I am going to show you how that works. I think it's pretty exciting. I hope this session served you, and see you in the next video.